Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Dilip from VALI RAMESHWAR'S IAS Academy, and we are going to discuss current affairs from the Hindu newspaper, that is 24th April 2020. To begin with, the first article is ISRO invites technology proposal for human space flight missions. The Directorate of Human Space Program of Indian Space Research Organization has invited proposals to develop indigenous technologies for its future human space flight missions. And that is nothing but the Gaganyaan. And Gaganyaan is destined to be around 2022, first human space mission by India. So as humans are going to go into space, they require a wide variety of support. ISRO has asked for the concepts that can arrange from food and medicine eaten by astronauts during the low Earth space trips to anti-radiation and thermal protection technologies for spacecraft, life support system for astronauts, and inflatable habitats, robotic interfaces during more complex missions. This announcement of opportunity issued this week suggests 17 areas of work for national research. So they have called for people to come up with technologies, that is indigenous technologies, in this 17 potential work areas. And the director of Human Space Program has sought the proposals by July 15. Then a selection committee will be formed to scrutinize the proposals, and affordable local technologies that could support human survival in low Earth orbits and in bigger exploration later will be selected. This opportunity will enable national research and academic institutions to harness their expertise and capabilities towards development of technologies for space exploration. So if you see Mission Gaganyaan, it was announced around the August 2018, where it would be the first human space trip which is slated in 2022 with a total budget of 10,000 crore, which is nicknamed as Gaganyaan. It plans to send 3 astronauts to a distance of 400 kilometers in the space, and that is nothing but a low Earth orbit. So, what is an orbit? An orbit is a curved path that an object in the space, that is a planet, star, moon, spacecraft, takes around another object due to its gravity. So, if at all you see this is the sun or any planet, so around it, if another body is making a curved path, another body is this small body, then this path is called a orbit. And what is meant by low Earth orbit? Low Earth orbit is an orbit around the Earth with an altitude above the Earth's surface from 160 kilometers to 2000 kilometers. So because under Gaganyaan, the astronauts are being sent up to a distance of 400 kilometers in space, it will come under the low Earth orbit mission. So currently, 4 pilots of Indian Air Force are being trained in Moscow, and 3 of these individuals will be the first to go into space from India. If you see the trivia, the first human to go into space is Yuri Gagarin. The first woman to go into space is Valentina Tereshkova. And first Indian to go into space is Rakesh Sharma. So Rakesh Sharma did go into space with a collaboration of ISRO and Soviet Intercosmos program. But the launch vehicle was not from India. So by Gaganyaan, what is happening? The launch vehicle is from India. All the technologies will be indigenous technologies, and it will be the first manned mission from India without the support of any country. And if you see the Human Space Flight Center, which is situated in Bangalore, it is responsible for implementation of Gaganyaan project, which involves end-to-end mission planning and development of engineering systems for crew survival in space, crew selection and training. Also, pursue activities for sustained human space flight missions. Human Space Flight Center will take support from existing ISRO centers to implement the first development flight of Gaganyaan under the Human Space Flight Program. So, if you see ISRO, that is Indian Space Research Organization, which is headquartered in Bengaluru, its vision is to harness space technology for national development while pursuing space science research and planetary exploration. Then moving on to the next topic, government to suspend IBC rules for up to 1 year. So what is IBC? IBC is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So why the government is thinking on suspending, or it has suspended the IBC rules for 1 year. So insolvency means whenever a company's assets are lesser than its liabilities, then the company is in a situation that it can never pay back its liabilities. In such circumstances, that will be a huge burden on the creditors, because the creditors are not going to get back the money. So such condition is called as insolvent, and the company will have to be declared as insolvent, and the proceedings for liquidization of the assets of the company which is insolvent is begun, and that process is called insolvency. By insolvency, the liquidation of the assets of the company that is insolvent will be done, and the amount will be distributed among the creditors. And the other word is bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a legal term where individual do not have any money to pay back his or her debts. So here also the assets of the individual are far less than the liabilities of the individual, and the individual can no longer pay back the money he owes to any of his creditors. In such situation, the individual will have to approach the court or judiciary, where the court will declare the individual to be bankrupt. Then bankruptcy proceedings will be started. Whatever assets will be there with him will be liquidated. So this insolvency and bankruptcy code was made into an act in the year 2016. So if you see the insolvency and bankruptcy code 2016, what is it? It is the bankruptcy law of India which seeks to consolidate the existing framework by creating a single law for insolvency and bankruptcy. The bankruptcy code is one-stop solution for resolving insolvencies, which previously was a long process that did not offer an economically viable arrangement. The code aims to protect the interests of small investors and make the process of doing business less cumbersome. So if at all you see the earlier period before the introduction of the IBC, so the resolution process which was in place by the SARFACI Act were not doing justice to the insolvency, because insolvency was taking a longer period of time, whereby which whatever assets were present with the insolvent companies further undergo depreciation, and the amount that the creditors can get back is going to decrease drastically. So to overcome this, or to reduce the insolvency period and to hasten the process, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code was introduced and made into an act in 2016. Now, moving on to the topic, in a major relief to the corporate borrowers hit hard by COVID-19 pandemic, the government has decided to amend the insolvency law to suspend up to 1 year provisions that trigger insolvency proceedings against defaulters, according to sources. So normally, as per the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016, which was amended in the year 2019, it states that if at all a company is in insolvency, then the group of creditors can come together and ask for insolvency process to begin. And once the insolvency process begins, the total time period for total resolution of insolvency period stands at 180 days. And if at all it is not done, an additional time period of 90 days is given for the insolvency proceedings to complete. And if at all the insolvency proceedings are not completed in the total period of 270 days, because it involves a lot of legal proceedings, and if at all these legal proceedings are delaying the process, then the total time period that is set for the winding up of entire insolvency proceedings stands at 330 days. And in a recent judgment of the Supreme Court has held that this 330 days is not the limitation, because at times, because of judiciary delays, this 330 days can be extended, and there is no rule that 330 days has to be adhered to. And here, for the coming 1 year, as per the amendment made to insolvency law, what happens is no proceedings of insolvency can be started against the defaulters. So, because in the wake of the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, many businesses, many companies are not in function, And when they are not functional, they are not able to get earnings, by which they are defaulting or they are going to default on their loans. And once they default and further their burden increases, that is, their liabilities keep on increasing when compared to their assets. Over a period, their liabilities are going to far overweigh their assets. In such scenarios, the creditors will usually have the right to begin the insolvency proceedings against such companies. But a relaxation has been given to those companies which are in distress because of the pandemic of COVID-19 by diluting the limitation or by diluting the restriction that insolvency proceedings can not be started against such companies for a time period of 1 year. And also, not only the time period that has been given, the IBC would also pave way for the banks to restructure loans, by which assume that a loan has been extended and the company is not able to pay back the loan. Then, because of the lack of business, because of its assets drastically getting decreased or depreciated, in such conditions, the bank can restructure the loan. The time period, tenure of the loan can be increased, certain amount of the loan can be waived off, something or the other can be done, by which the companies can be salvaged. And here, especially talking about section 7, 9, and 10 of the IBC would be suspended for 6 months, and the suspension time can be extended up to a period of 1 year. So, what are these section 7, 9, and 10? Section 7 and 9 pertain to initiation of corporate insolvency proceedings by a financial creditor and an operational creditor. And section 10 relates to filing of an application for insolvency resolution by a corporate. So these sections have been suspended, by which they do not allow for filing of the insolvency against these companies, which is a breather to these companies so that they can try to survive in these hard times. Moving on to the next thing, RBI to restart Operation Twist to manage yields. So what is this Operation Twist? It is the name given to the monetary policy tool that the US Federal Reserve had initiated to influence the prevailing rate of interest in the markets. So you have to understand here two important aspects. One is for long-term investments and short-term investments. So the long-term investments will usually have a higher interest rate compared to short-term investments. And the banks tend to pay higher interest rates to long-term investments compared to short-term investments. You can see your savings bank account and fixed bank account interest rates, they both vary. So in the market, people invest more in long-term bonds compared with short-term bonds. Bonds are nothing but debt instruments given by government or corporates so that they can raise money. And once these bonds are present, that is long-term bonds are present in the market, like for a tenure of 10 years or so, these governments are bound to pay higher interest rates. And whenever governments are paying more interest rates, that is nothing but the banks are paying more interest rates, they can not be forced at the same time to give away or extend loans at lower interest rates. So if you see the bank structure, how is the bank capable of paying interest on your deposits? It is possible because banks also gain interest by extending loans. So if banks gain less interest on the loans they have extended, they cannot pay higher interest rates to the depositors of long-term bonds or long-term deposits. This is highly impossible. So to maintain a level playing ground, that is, if at all the government wants to pump liquidity into the market, then government sees that or the RBI or the central bank sees that more loans are extended into the market at a lower interest rate. And this can be possible only if the interest rates of the long-term investments or long-term bonds is also slashed. And how can this be done? Because the bond has also already been sold and people will not be interested to sell back their long-term bonds. So the RBI has started Operation Twist in order to manage the yields of long-term and short-term bonds. We will see how this can happen. So in Operation Twist, what happens is the government will try to purchase more number of long-term bonds from the market and at the same time will try to sell off short-term bonds into the market through its open market operations. So you can see the RBI, that is Reserve Bank of India, has announced simultaneous purchase and sale of government bonds in a bid to soften long-term yields. What the central bank is going to do is it is going to buy 10,000 crore of bonds maturing between 2026 and 2030 and sell the same amounts of treasury bills, that is short-term yield bonds or bills. Here, whenever the government purchases long-term yields or long-term bonds because of shortage of the commodity, that is shortage of these bonds in the market, will increase its price, thereby which reducing its yield. So when the yield of the long-term bonds is decreased and at the same time their price is higher, people will be less interested to purchase long-term bonds. At the same time, when the government is selling large amounts of short-term bonds into the market, the supply will be more when compared with the demand. So the price of these is going to be less. Automatically, the yield or the benefit that the individual gets at the end of the maturity of the short-term bonds will be slightly higher. So people will be interested to purchase more amount of short-term bonds, by which majority of long-term bonds will be purchased by the government. And once the government has majority of long-term bonds, government can tweak the interest rates of long-term bonds, by which it will be beneficial to the government or the banks that they can now extend loans into the market at a lower interest rates. This is the meaning of Operation Twist. So you can see that the government securities under open market operation for 10,000 crore each will be sold. Government has already carried out this Operation Twist in the December month of last year, and they have seen that the yields on 10-year bonds have been dropped by 20 basis points. This move will also aid monetary transmission by prompting banks to pass on interest rate cut benefits to their customers, that is by extending loans at a lesser interest rate. The RBI has reduced key policy rate or the repo rate by 75 base points to 4.4% in the monetary policy review. So what is repo rate? Repo rate is nothing but the rate at which RBI lends to the banks. So by reducing it, banks will take more loans from RBI, and because they have surplus liquidity, they are also going to extend more loans into the market at a lesser interest rate. And if you see the normal or general yield curve for Indian government bonds, if the time period which is on x-axis and the percentage of interest on y-axis, 1 year bonds interest is 5.4, 2 years 5.9, 3 years 6.2, and as you increase the time period like 8 years it reaches to 6.82, means longer bonds or long-term investments will give higher yields. Short-term investments will yield lesser interest or yield. And here a yield curve is a line that plots yields or interest rates of bonds having equal credit quality but differing maturity dates. So you can see here 1 year is maturity date, here 8 years is maturity dates. The slope of the yield curve gives an idea of future interest rate changes and economic activity. There are three types of yield curve shapes. That is, one is normal, which is upward sloping. Upward sloping means it will be going like this. And second is inverted or downward sloping. Downward sloping is like this. And flat. Flat means it goes on like this. So three types of yield curves. So in the first one is upward. You can see that as the years passes in long-term investments, that is, the interest rates will be higher. If it is an inverted curve or inverted slope of the yield curve, it indicates that as time period passes on, means as years increase in long-term investments, the yields rate will decrease. If it is flat, there is no significant change. Then moving on to the next topic, gold attracting first time buyers of late. So because of the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, what happens is there are significant damage to a lot of investments. The share market is fluctuating. All the investments are frozen. There is a lot of doubt among the people where they have to invest. And in this time when only one commodity is on the rise, that is the gold prices are ever increasing. So people are interested in investing in purchasing of gold. So nearly 30% of respondents who had never bought gold open to investing. That is what the survey tells. So if at all you see India occupies second position in gold consumption after China. So as per the data revealed by the World Gold Council, what is World Gold Council? It is a market development organization for gold industry which is headquartered in London. So this survey done by World Gold Council has revealed that 29% of retail investors surveyed had never bought gold in the past but are open to the idea of buying gold in the future, and 52% of investors already owned some form of gold, with 48% having invested in the 12-month preceding in the survey. So people are interested to purchase gold. But what is the one key issue that has to be addressed? So the key issue that has to be addressed is lack of trust, because people do not have the idea whom to trust when purchasing gold. So the weight, despite of having BIS hallmark and lot of other things in place, people do not know where they can purchase the actual gold, as they do not have the trust in the market. And the survey also talks about in urban areas, 76% of investors surveyed had invested in gold in the past, while 21% were open to buying gold in the future. So we have to wait and see how and what is going to happen to the price of bullion. Will it be steady over the coming days? Moving on to the next thing. Repo auction gets poor response. So what is this repo auction? We have seen repo rate. Repo rate is the rate at which the RBI or the central bank lends to the banks in the country. First, you have to see about the LTRO. What is meant by LTRO? LTRO stands for long-term repo operations. It is a tool that lets banks borrow 1 to 3 year funds from the central bank at the repo rate by providing government securities with similar or higher tenure as collateral. There is another word that we should be knowing is TLTRO. What is TLTRO? So if these LTRO operations are done specifically so that the banks can get these funds and they have to be targeted towards a particular sector, then it is called as targeted long-term repo operations. So it is when the central bank wants banks opting for funds under this option to be specifically invested in investment grade corporate debt. So what is meant by investment grade corporate debt? It indicates or it signifies bonds that have relatively low risk of default, like the government bonds. Though the government bonds are not graded as the safer ones or the best or top performing, it is known that the government bonds offer a sense of security. So moving back to the topic proper, you can see the first auction of second tranche of Reserve Bank of India's targeted long-term repo operations TLTRO 2.0, which are meant for liquidity support for NBFCs, received poor response, as total value of bids received from the banks was almost 50% less than the notified amount. So you have to understand a little bit of terms here. You have to simply understand that there is lack of liquidity in the market because of the pandemic. Especially the non-banking finance companies are most hurt because RBI has given a 3-month moratorium on repayment of or payment of EMIs, and banks have done the same to its customers. But NBFCs, which function by granting or getting amount or fund from the bank, then extend or invest this amount to the customers. And this moratorium is also in place for the customers but not offered for NBFCs. So NBFCs which have borrowed from the banks have to pay their EMIs, where customers who have borrowed from NBFCs do not need to pay the EMIs for the coming 3 months. Hence, the NBFCs will be in a crisis where it will not have any liquidity, and when NBFCs do not have any liquidity, they cannot extend loans or further benefits to the customers, whereby which it will significantly affect the economy. To prevent this from happening, what RBI has done is it has given a targeted long-term repo operations. That is, RBI has extended loan to banks so that they can take this loan at the repo rate, and they have to use this money or fund especially to fund the NBFCs. That is the meaning of this. So when repo auction in support of NBFCs was kept by the RBI, there were no significant takers. Only 50% of total amount that was kept was bidded for. You can see RBI received 14 bids worth 12,850 crore in the auction that was conducted against a notified amount of 25,000 crore of 3-year tenure. So this indicates that there is limited participation by banks in the targeted long-term repo operations, which clearly highlights the bank's reluctance to lend to mid-size and small NBFCs and microfinance institution in the current situation. So banks want to be very careful that they do not want to increase or risk their NPS by lending more money to this NBFCs. You can see there is a lot of NBFCs crisis going on in the country, IL FS, etc. And here RBI says that whatever money that has been taken through the auction from the RBI has to be availed and deployed in investment grade bonds, commercial paper, and non-convertible debentures. And at least 50% of the total funds availed, 12,850, 50% of this is roughly 6,000 odd. So 6,000 odd crores should be deployed in small and mid-sized NBFCs. So we will see what these terms are. We've already seen investment grade bonds, means the bonds which do not have much risk associated with it. What are commercial papers? So commercial papers are unsecured short-term debt instruments issued by corporations. Then coming to non-convertible debentures. So you know what is meant by a debenture? A debenture is a debt instrument or a bond which has a fixed return, that is interest. And non-convertible debentures is sometimes these debentures will be taken back by the issuing authority. And like if a company has given debentures, if you have purchased the debentures, and at one point the company offers that it will buy back the debentures, and in return it is going to give you the shares of the company, those are called as convertible debentures. And coming to non-convertible debentures means the debt instruments or debentures which cannot be changed to shares. So this is how the RBI has decided that this will be the way that the amount will be deployed, especially supporting the NBFCs. But because of the risk averse nature of the banks, it will lead to choked lending, and it will affect and increase the woes of NBFCs. Moving on to the next topic. Listed firms can raise funds 6 months post buyback offer, says SEBI. So you have to understand what is meant by listed firms. Listed firms are the firms that are listed on the stock exchanges, that is National Stock Exchange or Bombay Stock Exchange. And it means that they have given shares already sold in the public. That is IPO has been done or FPO has been done. So what is this buyback offer? So buyback offer, which is also called as share repurchase. So it is when a company buys its own outstanding shares to reduce the number of shares available in open market. So you have to see, as part of measures to ease fundraising for companies amid the ongoing volatility due to the COVID-19 pandemic, SEBI has allowed listed companies to raise funds after 6 months of making a buyback offer. Under the normal circumstances, SEBI norms stipulate a minimum gap of 12 months between a buyback offer and any fundraising activity by a listed company. Take an example of a listed company. Assume Maruti Suzuki. So Maruti Suzuki has a lot of shares in the market. So it decides that more shares are present in the market. We will purchase it. That is nothing but it is giving a buyback offer. So under buyback offer, what it is doing is it is repurchasing certain shares. So total, assume that there are 80% shares of Maruti Suzuki in the market. And out of this, the promoter or the owner is owning 51% of shares. And company wants to get back 20% of the shares to itself. Then what it does, it gives out a buyback offer. And as per the rules stipulated by SEBI, once this Maruti Suzuki makes a buyback offer, it cannot again give out new shares for sale in the market. That is, it cannot give out follow on public offering within a period of 12 months. That is under normal circumstances. So, seeing the present scenario, that is, there are a lot of volatility in the market, there is no scope that a lot of companies that are affected because of non functionality, because of multiple reasons, lack of capital, lack of labor, and all these things. If they want to raise money from the public, how can they do that? Only option left is by issuing shares. And this facility is available only after 12 months after the buyback offer is given by these listed companies. So it will be a long period. SEBI has diluted these norms or reduced this period that the listed companies can raise funds 6 months after the buyback offer, thereby with significantly reducing 6 months time period, which is going to benefit these companies to raise funds and subsequently sustain. And apart from this, the watchdog has also relaxed certain compliance norms for entities that are planning to come up with initial public offer. So because of the liquidity crunch, lack of funds, some companies which have never listed their shares or which have never given the initial public offer will come to this initial public offer or issuance of shares. And also, SEBI has enlarged the definition of entities eligible for making fast track rights issue. So you have to understand what is meant by fast track right issue. It is a faster and cost effective method of raising capital by listed companies. So normally listed companies, how can they raise capital? We have just seen that is by issuance of shares. But apart from this, they have another option that is called fast track rights issue, which is only available to certain listed companies which fulfill certain criteria laid down by SEBI. This criteria is a lot big. So recently they have changed it. So initially it was necessary that this listed company should have a capital of more than 1,000 crores or so. Now it has been reduced to 200 crores. And apart from this, there are several criteria. Once these criteria are fulfilled by the listed companies, then they can utilize this option of fast track rights issue. Moving on to the next topic. Bangladesh to turn back Rohingya boats, says minister. Why Bangladesh is turning back Rohingyas and who are these Rohingya Muslims? You have to understand this terminology. So who are Rohingyas? The Rohingyas are an ethnic community who live in Myanmar's western Rakhine state, and these are Muslim people who belong to the Sunnis. And these Rohingyas have decades suffered from state-sanctioned discrimination in the Buddhist majority Myanmar, which considers them illegal settlers from Bangladesh. So if you see the Rohingya crisis, so it begins with the independence of Myanmar from the Britain, and with this independence, the Rohingya Muslims in Rakhine province lose jobs and properties. And in 1961, Myanmar declares Buddhism as its state religion, and then followed by military rule in the Rohingya territories. And 1974, Rohingyas have been denied right to vote. And in 1982, the significant change, that is, the new Citizenship Act denies Rohingyas citizenship, and they are considered as illegal migrants into Myanmar who are originally from Bangladesh. And in around 1991 to 1992, there is an exodus over time leads to estimated 2 lakh Rohingyas living illegally in Bangladesh. And the actual present problem dates back to 2012 when tensions flare up in Rakhine State, that is the place where the Rohingyas have been living after rape and murder of a Buddhist woman. It is claimed that Rohingyas are the perpetrators and led to assassination of 10 Muslim pilgrims, which has led to sectarian clashes and a mass exodus of the Rohingyas. Then, you see the topic in particular, Bangladesh will not accept 2 boats carrying hundreds of reportedly starving Rohingya refugees, the country's foreign minister said on Thursday. The new controversy over stranded Rohingyas blew up just a week after dozens starved to death on a boat that was left at sea for 2 months before it could land. So, what happens is if you see the Rakhine state, which is a part of Myanmar, is very close to Bangladesh, and because of the persecution of this Sunni Muslim minority group by the Buddhist majoritarian group, these people are forced to flee from their home country, that is Myanmar. So the most ideal place is easier way is into Bangladesh because Bangladesh is sharing land boundary with Myanmar. And apart from this, in the recent time, because of a lot of problems that Bangladesh is facing, it has prevented entry of further Rohingya refugees into Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a large refugee camp in the Cox's Bazar district in Chittagong in Bangladesh. This being full, now Bangladesh is not interested in accepting further Rohingyas as refugees. So these Rohingyas do not have anywhere to flee and they started moving into the Bay of Bengal region using small boats. And these people are also called as boat people because they are trying to enter Bangladesh using boats and other territories using boats. And in the recent time, Bangladesh has not allowed this boats and it is not going to further allow any Rohingyas into the country. So if you see the Indian government stance, it is the same. Indian government has deported significant number of Rohingyas into their home country, that is Myanmar, and also into Bangladesh, and has pledged to support this Rohingyas who are fighting a crisis. Moving on to the next topic. Iran vows to hit back if threatened. The increasing tensions between US and Iran have seen a newer height in recent days. And that is because of the joint comprehensive plan of action, that is the Iran-US nuclear deal, has miserably failed. Initially, with US claiming that Iran has not abided to its deal, that it is continuing with its uranium enrichment and also it is moving forward with its ballistic missile development program. With this, US has unilaterally withdrawn from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that has been signed by US and other countries. So once US has unilaterally withdrawn, then later Iran has also withdrawn out of this nuclear deal. And because of these actions, US has imposed trade sanctions. And this trade is not going to be hampered because European countries have come up with an instrument which is called as INSTEX, which means Instrument for Support of Trade Exchanges. So the T5 plus one country is Germany have made this JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran. And Instex is a payment channel from Europe to Iran, not abiding to the sanctions imposed by US. And later, US has involved in a drone attack, killing Iran's head of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qasem Soleimani. And because of these reasons, there is an increased tension between US and Iran. And recently, US has said that their ships have come very close with the Iranian ships, thereby which they have been harassed. So now US has declared that US will retaliate and it will destroy if any of its ships are threatened in the Persian Gulf. As a retaliation to the statement made by US, Iran has also made a statement which tells Iran will destroy US warships if its security is threatened in the Gulf. If you can see here, this is the Persian Gulf. This is an area where world's large amounts of crude is going to be transported through this route, and Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, which is a significant part here. Moving on to the next thing, Trump signs executive order for restricting immigration. So, with the ongoing pandemic affecting significant population of the US, that is, US citizens have lost their jobs in the past 60 days. 4.4 million Americans have declared themselves unemployed in the week ending April 18th. So, with the increase of more unemployed individuals in US, the US President Donald Trump has decided to restrict immigration into the country for the next 60 days. So this next 60 days, they are only going to restrict few, where individuals with H-1B visas are not going to get affected. Individuals with EB-5 visas are also not going to get affected. It is only for the individuals who are citizens of the country or who are having permanent resident in the country but want to bring their extended family into the country. So that is not going to be allowed. We have to wait and see how this is going to impact the country of US. CISR lab defends sanitization tunnel after ministry's advisory. So recently the health ministry has given an advisory that sanitization tunnels are not safe and they may have adverse effect on the health of the individuals, leading to irritation of eyes, nose, throat, and multiple other aspects, not to be used on the skin of individuals, but to be used for sanitization of the surfaces where the virus can be present. But the CISR, that is Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, with its NCL, that is National Chemical Laboratory, and Mumbai-based Institute of Chemical Technology, both have made a joint statement citing that the efficacy of sodium hypochlorite, which is also known as hypo or bleach, which is ranging from 0.02% to 0.05% by weight, have been studied, and it is known that it is not going to affect any individual adversely. It says the results indicated that it did not show any adverse effects on the skin, and thus we recommend using 0.02% or to 0.05% weight sodium hypochlorite solution, which is also called as Dakin solution or Carroll Dakin solution. And moving on to the next thing, model shows deaths cases rising over next 3 weeks. So there is a model which has been developed by healthcare workers across the country. It has been taking into consideration about the trends of number of infections and deaths throughout the world, and they've come out and created a model that will also take into consideration about the predictions of the COVID-19 cases in India. So this model shows that in the coming weeks, the number of cases are going to increase and more number of people are going to require the ICU support, that is intensive care unit support. So it is said that by May 6th, the COVID-19 related deaths in the country would be around 3,964, and by May 14th, it would stand around 14,025, and ICU patients would be around 7,928 and 28,049 by May 14th. So we have to wait and see whether this indications that come out by the prediction model are true or not. But even though it gives out a bleak forecast, we have seen that relatively dip in cases in the recent past. That is, the recovery rate is increasing, that is around 20%. Death rate is constant at around 3.1%. Moving on to the next topic, industries cannot be forced to pay wages panel. Our Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi has requested that the industry should continue paying wages to the workers in order to sustain their livelihoods despite of suffering a bad fate because of the ongoing global pandemic of COVID-19. But a panel has recommended that industries cannot be forced to pay wages to its employees. This is based on the Parliamentary Committee report on labor and its report on the Industrial Relations Code 2019 was submitted on Thursday, and it has recommended that in case of natural calamities, payments of wages to the workers until the establishment of the industry may be unjustifiable. This committee assumes that COVID-19 is similar to a natural calamity, and in case of natural calamity, the companies or the industries cannot be forced to pay their workers, and if it is done so, it is unjustifiable. And this committee chairman, Mr. Bhatruhari Mahatab, has said the ongoing lockdown to check the spread of COVID-19 can be counted as one such calamity, that is, natural calamity. So, what is this Industrial Relations Code 2019? The Industrial Relations Code bill was tabled in the parliament, that is, you can see, was introduced in the Lok Sabha by Ministry of Labour Employment, Mr. Santosh Kumar Gangwar, and it aims on or replace to three labour laws, which includes the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947 and the Trade Unions Act of 1926 and the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act of 1946. So once this bill was tabled in the Lok Sabha, it was referred to a parliamentary committee which was headed by Mr. Bhatruhari Mahatab to look into the matters. The industrial code makes it incumbent upon the employer to pay 50% of wages to the workers or employees who are laid off due to a shortage of power, coal, raw material, and such instances for 45 days. But seeing that this is not because of the shortage of any of the raw materials or power on behalf of the company, it is seen as a natural calamity. And in a natural calamity, there is no chance that the companies or industries should be held responsible or forced to pay wages to these individuals. And there is a stark criticism to this because in such a condition, in this dire condition of COVID-19 pandemic, how can a parliamentary committee require to say that they do not or the industries do not have the liability to pay wages to their employees? Moving on to the next thing, fishing in troubled waters during a pandemic. So this article talks about China seeks to restore its credibility. Creating tensions in South China Sea should be least of its priorities. So as the pandemic is going on, China is trying to reconsolidate its position in the South China Sea. So what is this South China Sea? South China Sea is a disputed territory in the southern aspect of China. This area is disputed by countries including China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, Philippines, and Taiwan. So this area is designated by the 9 dash line. So if at all you know, you have the concept of the territorial waters, you have the concept of contiguous zone, and you have the concept of exclusive economic zone. The territorial waters is extended till 12 nautical miles. The contiguous zone further 12 nautical miles, and the exclusive economic zone will extend from the shoreline till 200 nautical miles. But if you see the South China Sea, it is having close proximity with all these countries, and they fall in exclusive economic zone of several countries. And this area is disputed because China recently is claiming that this area belongs to it. Especially, it has taken its control over the Paracel Islands and Spratly Islands, which are also disputed. And why China is interested in this South China Sea region? So China's sweeping claims of sovereignty over the sea and China's estimated 11 billion barrels of untapped oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas have antagonized the contempting claims of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam. So, as early as 1970s, countries began to claim islands and various zones in the South China Sea, such as Spratly Islands and Paracel Islands, which possess rich natural resources and are fishing areas. So, China maintains that under international foreign militaries are not allowed or not able to conduct intelligence gathering activities such as reconnaissance flights in its exclusive economic zone. So China only thinks about that the South China Sea falls in its exclusive economic zone. It doesn't bother that the same is in the case of Vietnam and any other countries. And according to the United States, it says that the climate countries under UNCLOS, that is United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas, should have freedom of navigation through the exclusive economic zone in the sea, and they are not required to notify claimants of military activities. US is trying to appeal to China or to contradict China that even though it can be present, the South China Sea is present in the exclusive economic zone, it doesn't need permission from that country for safe passage. And in around July 2016, The Permanent Court of Arbitration, which is situated at Hague, has issued the ruling that was brought against China by Philippines under UNCLOS, ruling in favor of Philippines on almost every count, that Philippines is owning all this area. While China is signatory to the treaty which established the tribunal, it refuses to accept the court's authority. Because of China's refusal, it is trying to consolidate power or the demand that this area in the South China Sea belongs to it. And in view of this, you can see that a lot of incursions of China, that China has supported its fishermen through military or through naval ships supporting them, and all such activities, and using this as a window of opportunity. So as we can see, Xi Jinping has miserably failed in containing the pandemic of COVID-19 in China, leading to causing ire among the people. This is a time that he can exploit by increasing China's claim in the South China Sea. He can divert the attention of his people, and it is the same time a window of opportunity where the world is fighting the pandemic. China tries to utilize this time period. Moving on to the next topic. First batch of seafarers disembark in Mumbai. We have already seen this topic, that the government has facilitated for disembarkment of the seafarers in three phases. The first phase being all the ships that are present in the ports or docked in the ports of Indian ports will be allowed. These seafarers will be allowed from those ships to disembark into India, especially into Mumbai here, and then they will be quarantined and later they will be sent to their home places. And they will also be provided e-passes by which they can travel from the area where they have disembarked to their hometowns. And at the same time, in phase two, the seafarers who are present in the vessels that are present in deep seas will be allowed to disembark into India and quarantined and again sent to their home places. And in phase three, the seafarers who have already disembarked and signed off in foreign countries will be allowed to enter into the country after the ban on international travel has been lifted. So now the first phase of seafarers have been allowed and they have disembarked in Mumbai and are presently undergoing quarantine.